Emerging from a Montana blizzard, a German shepherd limped forward, her sable coat crusted with frost and snow. She raised herself onto her hind legs, silently pleading for help. Moments later, a former Marine caught the sound of her fractured bark and followed its echo into the dense woods. In a frozen ravine beneath a shattered spruce, a German shepherd pup lay bleeding into the pristine snow, surrounded by illegal snares gleaming like cold, sharp blades. One man, one mother dog, one cabin warmed by firelight, bound by a vow that no soul would be left out in the freezing night. What unfolded next will restore your faith in quiet miracles and the power of second chances. But before we dive in, tell us, where are you joining from tonight? Drop your homeland in the comments, and if you believe every creature, human or animal, deserves to be saved, don't forget to hit subscribe. The winter sunrise over Bozeman, Montana was slow and reluctant, as if even the sun hesitated to face the biting cold. The town nestled under the foothills of the Bridger Range rooftops, hidden beneath thick white drifts that caught the faint blush of first light. Beyond its narrow streets and weather-beaten homes, the mountains loomed vast and unforgiving. Their slopes were cloaked in pines glazed with frost. Snow didn't fall in heavy dumps, but in delicate, persistent flakes that whispered softly over the land, draping everything in a solemn hush. It was a quiet Ethan Ward knew intimately, like an old trusted friend. Ethan was 42, a former United States Marine shaped by years amidst the chaos of war zones. Standing 6 feet tall, his lean frame bore the discipline and resilience forged by survival. His hair, once black as night, now revealed streaks of steel gray at the temples. His beard, kept trimmed but coarse, spoke tales of experience salted like the sea. His sun-darkened skin told stories of long hours under foreign skies. But the sharp steel in his gray-blue eyes revealed the deeper truth, a man who had seen too much lost too deeply, and come home carrying both the heavy burden and the weariness of it all. His cabin, chosen for the life after service, stood a mile beyond town, nestled against the edge of a dense forest. Constructed from rough-hewn logs and rugged fieldstone, it had been abandoned for years until Ethan restored it by his own hands. Its lone chimney breathed out a thin wisp of smoke that vanished as soon as it met the wind. Inside the cabin was stripped down just a wood stove, a simple cot shelves lined with cans, and a rack of books weathered by war and rain. The solitude was deliberate. After years amid battlefields and barracks, Ethan craved no company but the quiet forest and the steady rhythm of his own breath. Yet even in isolation, routine was his anchor. Every morning before dawn, he donned his heavy wool coat and sturdy coyote-brown boots and patrolled the woods encircling his cabin. He carried an old Springfield rifle, not for hunting, but to steady his nerves. The Marine inside him never truly faded. He moved cautiously, eyes scanning the tree line, ears sharp for any break in silence. Out here, winter's cold held the power to kill the careless, just as surely as any foe. This morning the snow fell heavier. Ethan trudged along a narrow deer trail, his boots crunching with deliberate rhythm, his breath clouding in the frosty air, thoughts drifting, as they often did, to fallen comrades, men like Miller, who never returned from Kandahar, or Ortiz, who left a wife waiting back in El Paso. Their ghosts walked with him during these lonely hikes, uninvited yet familiar. Sometimes he'd whisper to them softly, his words carried away on the wind, hoping they might somehow reply. The silence shattered by a sound that didn't belong, a faint ripple against the soft snap of snow-laden branches. A harsh, ragged bark sliced through the stillness. Ethan froze, rifle raised toward the source, his breath held tight. Another bark broke free, hoarser, now edged with desperation, echoing through the trees like a haunting call. Not a warning cry, but a plea, a voice reaching out. His fingers clenched the rifle tighter. In Afghanistan, any sound cutting through silence spelled danger. But here in Montana's frost-bitten woods, the bark told a different story. It trembled with urgency, laced with a note he knew not from combat, but from something deeply human, fear for another's welfare. He planted his feet firmly, sinking boots deeper into the snow. His heart clenched, but not from fear. An unexplainable pull. "That's no coyote," he whispered. After all his years surviving the wild, he could tell. This was a dog, a big one by the weight behind its voice. The bark came again, closer now, clear through the muffling, snow-dampened air. Not the wild howling of a predator, nor a stray's territorial growl. It was cracked, hoarse, as if the creature had been crying out too long. There was urgency, yes, but something deeper, a plea that hit him straight to the core. Ethan recalled the K9 units he'd run with overseas, shepherds and Malinois dogs whose loyalty outlasted even the soldiers they served beside. He remembered dragging a wounded K9 from a crumbled compound, its handler fallen. The dog lived, but its haunted eyes stayed with him. That same echo rang out through the forest's bark. He shifted his rifle to his shoulder, not ready to shoot, but from muscle memory, and moved toward the sound. His pace quickened, breath sharp in the cold. The path grew steeper, snow deeper. Twigs cracked beneath his boots, and a lone crow burst into flight wings, fluttering wildly. Ethan slowed as he crested a small rise overlooking a frozen ravine. The barking had stopped, leaving a silence so profound he could hear his own blood pounding. His gaze swept the snow-white landscape below, every nerve alive. From the shadowy pines, a figure emerged, a German shepherd. Large, lean her coat, a sable blend of black and tan, dusted with snow like ash. Her ears pricked forward, but her stance held no hint of aggression. She stood upright, unsteady on her hind legs, 4 paws lifted not in threat but in a desperate gesture of pleading. Ethan blinked, doubting his senses. The dog's deep amber eyes locked on his with a raw intensity that startled him. She wasn't just announcing her presence. She was begging. Her chest rose and fell in ragged gasps, each breath a cloud of white in the icy air. Ethan lowered his rifle, frozen in place. Time seemed to bend. He was transported back to war, a comrade clutching his sleeve, eyes wild with desperate hope. But this was no Marine. This was a shepherd pleading with the same raw urgency. The dog let out a low guttural whine, then barked once more, shorter now before dropping to all fours. She took 2 cautious steps forward, then halted, ears twitching backward, as if checking he was following. Snow kicked up beneath her paws as she spun and trotted a few paces ahead, then paused once again, waiting. She glanced back over her shoulder, and Ethan's breath faltered. There was a spark of knowing in her eyes, more than mere instinct. She wanted him to follow. His grip tightened around the rifle's stock, yet his mind whispered that the weapon wouldn't be needed. Something deeper than training, deeper than fear, propelled him forward. Over his life he'd heard countless cries for help, from soldiers in battle, civilians caught in chaos, and the broken-hearted alike. This plea was no different. It was just spoken through another species. "All right," he murmured, voice barely rising above the howling wind. "Show me." The shepherd's ears twitched at his words. She barked once more, then disappeared down the gulch, her dark silhouette swallowed by the relentless fall of snow. Ethan set his jaw, pulled his coat tighter, and pursued her. For the first time in months, maybe even years, his heart pounded not from memories or ghosts, but from something vibrant, urgent, pulling him back to the path of compassion. As the wind clenched around him, the stillness of Montana transformed. It felt less like lonely isolation and more like a call to action. The forest thickened as Ethan followed the shepherd's trail. Snow fell relentlessly now, weighing down the branches of fir and pine until they bent beneath its frozen embrace. Each step sank his boots ankle deep. The rifle bounced against his back, slung over his shoulder. He moved with the steady, measured gait of a soldier, deliberate and restrained. Yet inside, something softened as he tracked the dog's fervent movements. She halted abruptly in a clearing where fragile light filtered through the canopy. The German shepherd faced him again. Rising onto her hind legs, she lifted her front paws in a posture of pleading, a gesture hauntingly human. The sight rooted him to the spot. Her lean form was strong and defined, no more than 5 or 6 years old. She bore the rugged elegance of a working dog, long limbs, a sturdy chest, her sable coat darkened to black, along the spine flaring into rich tan across her sides and legs. Snow dusted her fur, sparkling like shards of glass, and her amber eyes burned with a desperation that cut through the biting cold. Ethan had seen soldiers plead for mercy, men break down crying for their loved ones, comrades in arms, silently begging with eyes clouded by pain. But never had he witnessed an animal convey such raw, urgent clarity. It was as if she knew survival depended on being understood. He lowered his rifle fully, now hands open, palms toward her. His voice, roughened by the cold, carried softly between them. "What is it you want to show me, girl?" The shepherd barked sharply once, a crisp, clipped sound, then let out a whelp. A fierce noise caught somewhere between plea and command. She spun, took 3 quick steps into the trees, then turned back. The message was unmistakable follow. Ethan's chest tightened. His instincts honed over decades of service urged him not to ignore that call. Yet a fleeting thought surfaced. What if it's a trap? Not one laid by the dog, but by the wild itself. The snow hid dangers, thin ice, sudden drops, or worse, men with cruel intent. He shook off the doubt with a firm nod, dismissing the fear. Signals, he muttered under his breath, remembering how his unit always said he could read signs no one else could catch. The twitch of a hand, a shadow's shift, the crackle of static on the radio. Here was another signal, one born not from flesh and bone, but fur and paw. The language was unmistakable. The shepherd collapsed onto all fours, let out a soft whine, then padded deeper into the shadowed woods. Ethan adjusted the strap on his pack, took a steadying breath, and followed quietly. As they ventured further in, he caught the subtle specifics of her gait. She limped lightly on her back right leg, a tender hitch revealing an old wound. A pale, hairless scar traced the inner curve of that leg. His mind flicked back to a spring afternoon nearly a year ago, when he'd stumbled upon a dog trapped in rusted steel jaws near the river flats. He had freed her then, cutting his hands raw with the jagged metal. Could this be the same dog? The scar said. Yes. His throat tightened, unaccustomed to feelings breaking through his habitual armor of solitude. "You remember me," he whispered. The dog barked once, almost like an answer, before surging forward once again. The snow swallowed every sound except their steps. Yet once or twice Ethan thought he caught a faint scratching. Maybe a pained cry. His heart raced. Whatever drove this shepherd to such human appeals wasn't far ahead. They finally reached a small hollow where the trees pulled back like curtains, revealing a narrow ravine. The air here bit sharper, colder, as if the land itself drew breath. The shepherd leapt to the edge and spun, rising onto her hind legs again. She clawed at the air, chest heaving, eyes locked on Ethan. He stopped, every muscle taut with tension. Seeing such desperate pleading pierced him deeply. This was no mere instinct. This was a choice, a mother begging for aid. He stepped forward, rifle bumping his shoulder boots, crunching on the hollow's rim. The shepherd released a broken, low howl, then dropped to all fours, scrambling down the incline. Ethan's breath caught short. His thoughts churned back to battlefields where silent signals spoke volumes if one only looked close enough. This dog was scripting a desperate message in the snow with her body, her voice, her very stance. Though the sight ahead remained unseen, Ethan knew there was something in that hollow begging for rescue. The snow muffled every step, as if the forest itself held its breath to listen. Ethan moved cautiously down after the shepherd, his breath steaming in rhythmic, visible bursts. She didn't flee, didn't vanish into shadows like a wild creature might have. Instead, she paced a few steps ahead, then paused, turning back to ensure he was close behind. That steady exchange, her glance, his nod, became a silent dialogue, an unspoken bond sealed without words. When she halted at the base of a frost-darkened pine, Ethan saw it again. The subtle hitch in her back right leg, a limp nearly invisible, but unmistakable to a trained eye. She shifted weight uneasily, bracing against the icy snow. His eyes drifted downward, and there it was, the old scar pale against her deep sable fur, snaking crookedly along the inside of her leg. His chest tightened once more. He remembered that spring thaw almost a year ago, when he had discovered a shepherd caught in a rusted steel trap by the northern river flats near Bozeman. Her wails had sliced through the timberline that day, a haunting blend of rage and fear. He'd ripped the trap open with a crowbar, shredding his palms in the process. The dog had limped away, eyes wide and wary. He'd never expected to cross her path again, and yet here she was, faithfully here, standing before him, not trembling with fear, but glowing with recognition. The sudden understanding hit him like a flood, stealing his very breath away. "You," he breathed out, voice fragile and cracking against the biting cold. Slowly he stepped forward, lowering his rifle across his chest in a gesture of trust. The shepherd tensed for a heartbeat, then softened, ears folding back, as if she truly understood the moment. Ethan swallowed hard emotion, flickering like fire behind his eyes. "You're alive. And you came back." For weeks he'd spoken only to ghosts and the whispering woods. Now here he was, speaking to a dog, as if she were a fellow brother in arms. "You remember me?" He whispered, tone so soft, it felt more like a confession than words. The shepherd's amber gaze never once wavered from his face. A low whine escaped her lips, and she inched a few steps forward, then glanced back again. Her message was clear. There was no time for embrace or memories, something urgent called. Ethan exhaled, steadying himself, and followed. The path drew them deeper, where snow lay thick, blanketing the world between towering trees. Here faint tracks of smaller creatures caught his eye. Hairs of foxes, maybe a lynx, but no fresh signs of life. What stood out was a faint line of human boot prints slicing awkwardly across the untouched drifts. They weren't his, nor recent enough to belong to any ranger he recognized. Ethan knelt down, brushing snow from the trail. The edges blurred, but he judged them to be left 2, quite possibly 3 days ago. His brow furrowed. Poachers. Tales he'd heard from locals who dared venture this far into the wild. Men setting cruel wire snares and steel traps, heedless of law or mercy. He'd never met one face to face, but he knew the hate they deserved. The scar on this shepherd's leg was proof enough of their merciless cruelty. That thought hardened something bitter deep inside him. He pressed his gloved hand into the cold snow, where the print lay, then straightened, shoulders rigid beneath his coat. He kept moving with the shepherd eyes, now sharper, scanning the shadows beneath the trees. Halfway down the gully, a voice sliced through the silence. "Ward, is that you?" Ethan froze, rifle half raised, until the figure stepped from behind a cedar wrapped in a frost-dusted green parka. It was Calvin Hurst, a local trapper turned handyman who sometimes brought supplies into Bozeman. Calvin was in his early 60s, tall and lean, with a slight stoop, his face carved by years of sun and wind. His beard was thick but untamed, an elk antler stick in one hand, a canvas satchel slung across his shoulder. Calvin lifted his hand in a weathered greeting, pale eyes squinting against the glare of the snow. "Oh, didn't expect to find you out here this early. Trails are rougher than usual." Ethan lowered his rifle, but held his stance firm. He knew Calvin was a man of many words, always kind despite the chatter. Widowed a decade ago when his wife perished in a logging accident, Calvin carried a loneliness that made him cling to every conversation. "I was walking the line," Ethan replied evenly, nodding toward the shepherd. Calvin's brow lifted. "That dog again, I heard you rescued one from a trap last spring. Figured she'd gone wild." "She remembers," Ethan said softly. Calvin squinted at the shepherd standing a short distance off, tail raised, ears alert, but calm, not aggressive. "Doesn't look wild to me. Seems like she's got a purpose. Wants me to follow." "Well then," Calvin said, shifting his satchel with a quiet resolve. "Better not keep a lady waiting." A sly smile tugged at his lips, but Ethan shook his head firmly. "This path isn't yours, Calvin. Head back to town." Calvin studied him, his weathered face softening with understanding. He was a man hardened by loss, having buried more kin than he had left, and he knew when someone else carried a heavy burden. "Fair enough," he finally said. "But be cautious. Those footprints aren't mine. I saw 2 sets heading east yesterday, and they didn't have ranger badges." He tapped the side of his nose with a rough finger. "Smells like traps are set." Ethan gave a curt nod. "Nods. I'll watch my step." Adjusting his parka, Calvin trudged away, disappearing into the thick, snow-covered trees. Ethan lingered a moment, the warning echoing deep in his mind, then turned his gaze back to the shepherd. She had waited watching silently, as if she too grasped the gravity of what lay ahead. "You're not letting me walk away from this, are you?" Ethan asked. The shepherd barked once, sharp, resolute. He sighed, surrendering to the unyielding bond, and followed again. The forest thickened, the light fading, yet the shepherd pressed on with unwavering resolve. Occasionally she slowed, glanced back, then forged onward, her limping gait steady and purposeful. Ethan watched her words slipping from his lips almost involuntarily, like a soldier recognizing a comrade's lead. The memory of his unit tightened his throat. Men who had moved alongside him through deserts and mountains, where gestures spoke louder than words. He recalled the nod before storming a doorway, the glance meaning, "Cover me," the silence saying, "Trust me." That same unspoken alliance filled him now. The shepherd barked again and vanished over a snowbank. Ethan quickened his stride, breath-ragged boots crunching deep into the drift. Cresting the rise, he spotted her pause below, chest-heaving, amber eyes blazing with a plea deeper than any spoken word. Then he whispered, "All right, I'll follow you." The dog whimpered softly as if accepting his vow, and turned toward the hidden hollow beyond. The path grew brutal as Ethan ventured further into the mountainside, the shepherd leading tireless and unyielding. Snowflakes thickened, swirling like ash from a ghostly blaze. The wind funneled through the trees, low, mournful, a sound that seemed to carry the forest's secrets in its breath. Ethan gripped his rifle sling tighter, but never once lost sight of the dog ahead. She limped, yes, but pressed on with relentless determination. Whatever awaited was worth more to her than the sharp pain traced in her scarred leg. For nearly 30 minutes, they forged ahead, the slope drawing them down into a narrow ravine. The dark walls rose steep and high, dripping with ice, where meltwater had frozen into crystalline veils. Ethan's boots slipped on patches of hardened snow, and more than once he gripped a jutting root to steady himself. The shepherd glanced back, breath-ragged eyes wide with silent urgency urging him onward. Then he heard a sound so faint it could have been the wind's moan, but sharper, trembling, heartbreakingly alive. A bark, weak, broken, as if forced from lungs too cold and frail. Ethan froze, his heart pounding wildly. The shepherd surged down the last few yards of the incline, skidding abruptly to a stop beside a fallen spruce. Its massive trunk snapped and sprawled across the ravine floor, sliding to a halt next to a toppled spruce. Its colossal trunk shattered, sprawled across the bottom of the ravine. Deep snow blanketed the tree, yet from beneath the shattered limbs came the haunting sound again. A pitiful cry that sliced through Ethan's defenses, followed by a desperate whimper. He moved swiftly, dropping to one knee in the cold snow. And there, trapped under the splintered tree's weight, was a young German shepherd no older than 5 or 6 months, its coat a tender mix of tan and black, still soft with the fuzz of puppyhood. One hind leg was awkwardly pinned beneath a branch, crimson blood staining the pristine snow stark against its pure white canvas. The pup's ribs rose and fell in frantic, shallow breaths. The mother dog circled anxiously, pawing at the snow by the tree trunk, careful not to crush her trapped pup. She barked sharply at Ethan, then locked eyes with him, her gaze a raw, silent plea that spoke volumes. Ethan's throat tightened. He had seen soldiers pinned under collapsing walls, trapped and helpless, their comrades screaming for rescue. This was the same heart-wrenching desperation, only now it was a dog begging a stranger to save her child. "I see him," Ethan whispered, voice rough with cold and emotion. He set his rifle aside and leaned closer, brushing the snow from the trembling pup's frail body. The pup whimpered, eyes glazed with pain, yet sparking with life as Ethan's hands met the snowy ground. One ear flopped gently, not yet standing tall, giving the pup a look of innocence that pierced Ethan's heart. He tested the heavy branch's weight too much for bare hands. He needed leverage. Scanning quickly, he spotted a thick, broken branch nearby the tsur. Snatching it up, he wedged it under the trunk and pushed with every ounce of strength he could muster. His boot slipped, his back screamed, but the trunk shifted just enough for him to pull the pup free. The mother barked sharply and urgently, as if commanding him to hurry. The moment the pup was clear, she rushed forward, nuzzling and licking frantically at the bleeding wound, curling her body protectively around her child. Though never losing sight of Ethan held the pup close, feeling its trembling seep deep into his own chest. "Easy now, little one," he whispered gently. "You're safe." Reaching for the field kit strapped to his pack, a relic from his Marine days. He never left behind, he tore a strip of gauze, pressing firm against the pup's wound to slow the bleeding. As he worked, a new sound cut through the wind, the crunch of boots on snow. Ethan's head snapped up, muscles tensing. At the ravine's edge appeared a woman draped in ranger green, her parka hood trimmed with fur, carrying a satchel and walking stick. Her cold-stung cheeks blushed red, her dark hair pulled back in a low braid. "Ethan Ward," she called out, firm but cautious. Recognition struck him. It was Sarah Whitaker, Regional Park Ranger. Tall and lean in her mid-30s, her posture both disciplined and weary. Her brown eyes, sharp yet compassionate, assessed the scene with practiced skill. Sarah was well known in Bozeman, both respected and quietly feared. Admired for her unwavering dedication, feared for her refusal to bend rules when it came to wildlife safety. Years earlier, she had survived an avalanche while leading a rescue patrol, but that accident left her with a permanent stiffness in her knee and a fierce resolve to never allow carelessness to harm anyone else again. "What are you doing out here?" Sarah asked, easing down the slope with careful steps. Her eyes caught sight of the blood, the trembling pup, and the mother dog standing close by. Her voice softened in an instant. "Oh God," Ethan said nothing at first, his hand steady on the pup's injured leg. Finally he murmured, "She found me. Led me here." Sarah knelt beside him, her trained gaze assessing the situation. "The pups are in shock. You did the right thing stopping the bleeding. Now we need to keep him warm and stable." Her glance flicked to the mother dog, who growled low but didn't advance. Sarah's eyebrows rose. "She's trusting you. That's rare." Without hesitation, she pulled a thermal blanket from her bag, draping it gently over the small pup. "We'll have to carry him out. Can you handle it?" Ethan nodded solemnly. He'd carried wounded men far heavier than this fragile little life. Yet the weight cradled in his arms felt immeasurably precious. The shepherd mother pressed close to his side, her body radiating warmth despite the biting cold. Her gaze held steady, not suspicion anymore, but unwavering trust. She leaned in so close Ethan could feel her breath on his arm, as if entrusting him with the lifeblood of her child. The pup whimpered softly, then settled, resting its head against his chest. Ethan exhaled slowly, glancing at Sarah. "Let's get moving." The wind howled through the ravine, whistling between frozen stone walls. Ethan knelt in the snow, his knees soaked and numb, his gloved hands stained with fresh blood, working swiftly. The pup trembled on his lap, its chest rising in shallow, uneven breaths. The fur around its hind leg clung matted with blood. Next to him, Sarah crouched low, her eyes sharp with both skill and deep concern, while the shepherd mother stood so close, her breath steamed against Ethan's sleeve. Ethan's field kit, a weathered canvas pouch that had accompanied him from Helmand to Fallujah and back, was spilled open across the snow. Even in retirement, he'd kept it stocked, as if bracing for one more emergency. His fingers closed around the familiar handle of a combat knife, its blade worn but still razor-sharp. With it he sliced through the fabric of an old bandage roll, cutting strips to wrap tightly around the pup's injured leg. "Pressure first," he whispered, partly to steady himself, partly honoring the memory of medics who once barked orders amid gunfire. He pressed the gauze firmly in place enough to slow the bleeding, but gentle to avoid crushing fragile bones. Blood seeped steadily, turning his gloves dark, but his hands never wavered. Sarah handed him a thin strip of cloth from her satchel. "Use this to tie it off above the joint." He nodded, looping the fabric swiftly, tightening the knot. The pup let out a weak cry, its body jolting, but Ethan murmured calm, steady words. "Easy, soldier, easy." The words flowed naturally, just like when he'd crouch over a wounded Marine, urging them to hold on. The mother dog paced, whining low in her throat, her nose flicking between her pup and Ethan, her ears pricked forward, muscles taut, as if ready to spring into action at any moment. But she didn't attack, didn't interfere. She watched Ethan with the weary focus of a commander placing her trust in another's hands. "You've been through this before," Sarah murmured with quiet admiration, her voice alive with profound respect. Ethan kept his gaze low, adjusting the bandage, feeling the fragile heartbeat beneath his fingers. His gloves were slick with the pup's lifeblood, and his breath caught in the biting cold. Day in and day out, different faces in uniform, yet the same urgent desperation. Sarah's eyes softened briefly. She had heard the stories Ethan warred the Marine who returned, but never truly came back. She had witnessed men haunted like him, fractured by war, suspended between the present and memories that refused to fade. But now, watching him care for this trembling pup, she saw something new. The fierce determination that once saved lives in combat, now pouring into this fragile creature. The pup's whimpers faded as its bleeding slowed. Ears twitched, eyes fluttering half open in fragile awakening. Ethan brushed the snow delicately from its muzzle. "You're tougher than you seem," he said, his voice thick with cold and raw emotion. A shiver ran through him, adrenaline fading into trembling exhaustion. The biting wind sliced through his coat. Freezing sweat clung to the back of his neck. But his grip on hope never wavered. The pup had reignited in him a heartbeat he believed lost the unyielding urge to protect at all costs. The shepherd dog leaned in, pressing her nose against Ethan's wrist. The brief touch startled him. He met her gaze, eyes blazing with fear and gratitude. In that moment he swore he saw recognition, as if she remembered the day he freed her from the unforgiving steel trap. "Just 2 days ago I freed a deer caught in a snare," Sarah said softly, nodding toward the ridge. "Same brutal work, same merciless hands. This pup wouldn't have survived the night if it weren't for you," Ethan said, tightening the bandage one last time, and exhaling slowly. He whispered almost to himself, "Once I saved Marines. Today I save you." His voice drifted into the biting wind, nearly swallowed by the storm's howl. For a long, fragile moment, the three of them, man, ranger, and dogs, huddled against the storm. Snow fell like a veil around them, blurring their tracks, muffling the world outside their small, sacred circle. Finally, Sarah broke the stillness. "We can't stay here. The pup needs warmth and fast. We need to get him to your cabin." "It's closer than the ranger station," Ethan said, pulling the fragile pup tighter against his chest. The little body radiated faint heat, and he wrapped it carefully in the thermal blanket Sarah had handed him. He rose slowly, muscles stiff with fatigue, slinging his rifle over his shoulder once more. The shepherd mother pressed close her flank, brushing Ethan's leg, a tether of trust. Ethan glanced at her again, a grim smile tightening his lips. "You're watching me," he said softly, making sure I don't let go. Though his body trembled with cold, his steps were steady, his resolve unshaken, just as fierce as the dust and fire of his battles past. The storm raged on when Ethan, Sarah, and the steadfast shepherd began their slow, arduous climb out of the ravine. The pup, wrapped in gauze and cocooned in warmth, lay against Ethan's chest, fragile yet alive, each of Ethan's boots sinking deep into the thickening snow, the crunch swallowed quickly by fierce gusts. Sarah followed close behind her staff, tracing lines through the drifts, her keen eyes cutting through the white to the uncertain path ahead. Ethan's gaze stayed fixed on the little dog, its fragile breaths warm against his chest. Yet the soldier within him, the part that never ceased to scan his surroundings, caught a shift in the rhythm of the snow. Just a few yards to the left of their path, a boot print cut sharply into the white blanket. He slowed his pace, then dropped down low. Sarah stopped too, leaning on her staff. "What do you see?" He brushed away the fresh snow's top layer. Beneath it lay a deep imprint larger than his own. The edges held firm, fresh made less than a day ago. With gloved fingers he traced its outline, his jaw tightening. "Not yours, not mine. Someone else has passed here." Sarah joined him, brows furrowed. "Too deep for casual hikers. That's a heavy man's step, and he wasn't alone." She pointed farther down the slope where another trail crossed. Side by side they formed a rough path weaving through the woods like hunters cutting lines through the wilderness. Ethan stood, eyes sweeping higher up the ridge. That's when he noticed the first snare, a thin wire loop, almost invisible against the snow, anchored between two young trees. Its steel noose shimmered faintly, coated with frost's bite. His gaze followed the line and found another trap, then another set in a cruel array across a game trail where deer or elk might wander. A sick feeling churned in his gut. Sarah muttered a curse beneath her breath, her face tightening with resolve. "Poachers brazen enough to work this near the edge of town. I've pulled half a dozen traps this winter. But this is no accident." Ethan's memories surged sharp and relentless like shrapnel. He saw again the dust of Kandahar, the winding alleys of Fallujah, where enemies had planted hidden IEDs along the paths soldiers walked each day. They too had been nearly unseen until the moment of devastation. The gap between a war zone and Montana's forest vanished in that instant. Same merciless cruelty, same cowardice lying in wait for the unwary to step where death was set to strike. He shifted the pup in his arms, voice low and steady. "Our top priority is getting him safe. Then I'm coming back, all these traps come out of the ground." Sarah stole a sharp glance at him, weighing his resolve. She caught the set of his jaw, the steel flickering in his eyes, and she recognized it, that look of a man who's made his decision and won't be swayed. "I'll handle the report," she said. "But if you're thinking about doing this alone, don't. Poachers out here don't take kindly to being challenged." Ethan pressed his lips together hard. Neither did the Taliban. The wind shifted, sending snow swirling through the branches, but the heavy silence between them lingered. Sarah didn't push further. Years of experience taught her some men carry burdens too heavy to ever turn back once set in motion. They resumed their climb. The shepherd mother trotted beside Ethan, occasionally darting forward to sniff the snow or circle back to her pup, but never straying far. Her eyes flicked constantly toward the tree line, as if she too sensed the unseen threats lurking nearby. As they moved forward, Ethan's thoughts darkened. He recalled Miller, a young corporal who once joked about retiring to Montana, but never made it home because someone had hidden a bomb beneath the road. He remembered Ortiz, who led the point through a narrow canyon only to set off the trap meant to claim them all. Those memories sat heavy in his chest as he stared at the cruel snares gleaming in the forest. Different place, different war, same ruthless disregard for life. At one point, the pup let out a quiet whimper. Ethan shifted the fragile bundle closer to his chest. He looked down with softened eyes, gently loosening the blanket to assess the wound. The bleeding had slowed. The bandage held firm, though his gloves were stiffened by frozen blood. He tenderly caressed the pup's head. "Hold on, little one," he whispered. The shepherd mother pressed her body closer to him. Brushing his leg, her gaze locked on her pup. Ethan met her unwavering eyes. "I'll bring him back. You have my word." He had made promises before, some broken, but this one he vowed silently would stand firm. Halfway to higher ground, Sarah stopped crouching to inspect another set of tracks. "Look here," she said softly. The snow bore scuff marks, heavy crates dragged with purposeful force. "This is no mere passing of hunters. They're moving gear. This is a camp," she noted, and Ethan felt his pulse quicken. He envisioned cold-hearted men setting traps, laughing as animals choked in wire snares. They could be near watching at this very moment. His grip tightened on the rifle strap, but the pup let out another weak, pitiful whimper. Ethan forced his focus. First, keep the pup safe, then fight the battle ahead. Finally, they crested the ridge and the forest opened to reveal the faint trail leading back toward Ethan's cabin. The storm had lessened just enough, but the cold still bit sharply. The shepherd mother barked once, short, urgent. Her ears flicked back toward the ravine they'd left behind. Her message was clear. She knew the danger all too well. Ethan adjusted the pup in his arms, straightened his worn spine against the ache pulling at his limbs, and said aloud more to steady himself than the dog. "We'll finish this fight later, but first we keep him alive." Sarah nodded firmly, her braid dusted white with snow's cold kiss. "Agreed. Cabin first, then we plan." Together they moved forward with poacher's tracks, haunting their rear the fragile life in Ethan's arms and the relentless fight far from over. When they emerged from the ravine and found the path toward Ethan's cabin, dusk was settling slow and somber. The sky above the Bridger Range painted bruised shades of violet and steely gray, the temperature dropping deeper with every breath. Snow crunched underfoot as each exhale formed pale clouds clinging to their faces before the wind whisked them away. The pup whimpered faintly in Ethan's arms, shifting weakly against the warmth of the thermal blanket. He knew he couldn't carry that tiny weight through the deep drifts any longer. His body was nearing its breaking point. Muscles stiffened from the strain, every fiber in his back screaming for relief. He stopped beneath a stand of frozen birches, searching the ground. "We need something to drag him," Ethan said hoarsely, his voice weary but determined. Sarah's eyes locked on his. A sled could do the job, but they had none. Ethan's gaze fell on a sturdy fallen branch. Swiftly he cut and stripped it with his combat knife, working with practiced hands. He lashed crosspieces together with cord from his pack, crafting a rudimentary travois, like the soldiers had once built in deserts far away. He lined the frame with the blanket, then carefully laid the pup down. The small dog whimpered softly, once then settled ears flickering. Sarah tested the frame with a boot. "It'll hold," she said, voice edged with approval, though fatigue shadowed her eyes. She'd been on patrol since dawn. The long trek was taking its toll. Her limp was more pronounced now the old injury stiffened cruelly by the biting cold. "It'll hold," she said, a hint of approval in her voice, but her weary eyes revealed the exhaustion beneath. She had been out on patrol since the first light, and the relentless journey was wearing her down. Her limp had deepened the chill, making her old injury painfully rigid. Ethan saw it clearly, but chose to stay silent. Her pride would never accept pity. Firmly he grasped the harness of the makeshift sled and began to pull. The wood creaked beneath the strain, yet it glided over the snow with surprising grace. The shepherd mother matched his pace, her side brushing protectively against the travois, as if guarding it with unwavering loyalty. Every time the pup whimpered, her ears perked sharply, and she leaned in closer, searching for any sign of pain. The journey pressed on, a slow, determined crawl through the creeping night. Twice they paused to rest. Sarah handed Ethan a flask filled with lukewarm tea from her pack, and he accepted it gratefully, the warmth biting sharply at his tongue. Their words were few, just brief remarks about direction and footing, yet amidst that silence a quiet bond blossomed, like the unspoken trust shared between comrades in a foxhole. Finally, through the storm's haze, the familiar outline of the cabin emerged, a squat blend of timber and stone, its roof heavy with snow. Relief flooded Ethan's chest. He urged the travois forward with growing urgency, pushing until the door was close enough to grasp. Inside, the air was sharp and cold, yet still. Ethan gently lowered the pup near the hearth, then struck a match to the stacked wood in the stove. Flames roared to life, crackling fiercely. casting a warm glow across the single room. Shadows flickered on walls lined with tools and books, a rifle rack stationed by the door, and above a worn map of Montana pinned carefully over the desk. Sarah moved swiftly, retrieving a small pot from its hook, filling it with snow to melt into water. The shepherd mother paced restlessly at first, then settled by the doorway, sprawling across the threshold like a vigilant guardian. Whenever the wind howled through cracks, she lifted her head, ears alert, before refocusing her gaze on Ethan. Ethan carefully removed the pup's bandage, inspecting the wound by the firelight. The bleeding had slowed, though the skin remained raw and angry. He cleaned it gently with warm water, his hand steady despite the exhaustion causing subtle tremors. He rewrapped the leg this time with deliberate care, then offered the pup a shallow bowl of water. It drank weakly, spilling more than it took in. Yet even that small effort felt like a hard-won victory. Sarah crouched beside him, her brown eyes soft and admiring as she watched. "You've done more for him in this brief hour than many vets could in a whole day." Ethan shook his head, voice low and almost ashamed. "No, I just kept him alive. That's always been all I could do, keep them breathing through the night." Sarah's gaze held him, studying the rugged lines etched deep into his face, the scars along his knuckles, the haunted storm of his gray-blue eyes. She saw a man tethered to his past, yet now bound to something new, a fragile pup and the faithful mother who trusted him. The fire's warmth filled the room, melting the numbness from their limbs. Ethan leaned back against the wall, exhaustion weighing heavy on his frame. The pup finally slipped into sleep. Tiny body curled beneath a blanket chest, rising in a slow, steady rhythm. The shepherd mother stayed stationed by the door, but when Ethan shifted, her gaze met his with a surprising tenderness. Her amber eyes no longer blazed with fear. Instead, they shimmered with something far deeper recognition. He whispered softly to her, his voice gritty with emotion. "You found the right man, didn't you?" The dog tilted her head, ears flicking as if she comprehended. Then she lowered her head onto her paws, calm and content. Outside, the wind clawed fiercely at the cabin walls, rattling the shutters like a ghost's lingering breath. Yet the air brimmed with warmth, alive with the scent of crackling firewood and the unspoken bond of trust. For the very first time in many years, Ethan sensed that his cabin was more than just a loner's refuge. It had become a sanctuary where hope quietly took root. Dawn broke slow and gentle, painting the snowy peaks of the Bridger Range with a tender pink hue. The storm had already passed through in the night, leaving behind an air so clear and sharp it felt like the mountain itself had exhaled deeply, purifying the world. Golden ribbons of sunlight cut through the frost-laced windows, casting warmth upon the wooden floor of Ethan's cabin. Ethan stirred from a shallow rest in his chair near the hearth, his body-rigid boots still strapped tight from the night before. He had declined the cot's invitation, choosing instead to remain close to the fire, where the little pup lay wrapped up. Now the young shepherd twitched, ears flickering at the soft crackle of the flames. Its eyes slowly opened clearer and brighter than before, holding the fragile spark of survival. The mother dog, vigilant, had barely closed her eyes, her body curled defensively by the door like a guardian. Yet when she noticed her pup stirring, she rose and padded silently across the room, her paws whisper quiet against the wooden floor. She nudged the pup gently at its side, urging it to wake. Ethan leaned in, every muscle taut with hope. The pup whimpered softly, then pushed its front paws against the blanket. Shaky, trembling, it fought to stand. For a moment it wavered, uncertain, then took a hesitant step forward. Another followed. Though its injured leg bore weight with care, it stood strong. A slow smile crept onto Ethan's face, an expression rare and raw after many years of silence. He exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding so tightly. "There you go," he whispered. "Rise up, little warrior." The shepherd mother licked her pup's soft muzzle, eyes glowing with fierce pride. She glanced at Ethan once, and though no words were spoken, the message was unmistakable. You made this moment happen. From the far corner of the cabin, Sarah stretched her braid, cascading loosely over her shoulders. Her Ranger Parker slumped over a chair. She had stayed through the night, refusing to leave, while the pup's fate hung in the balance. Her brown eyes softened at the sight before her. "He's tougher than I thought," she said quietly. Ethan nodded, gaze locked on the pup. "Tougher than most men I've ever met." His tone carried no jest, only deep conviction. They fed the pup gentle sips of warm broth, coaxed from dried meat Sarah had tucked in her pack. It ate cautiously but eagerly, before curling briefly against its mother's side, then pushing itself up once more. Each attempt steadied its resolve, soon moving in shaky, uneven circles, testing its strength, while the firelight kissed its fur with glowing copper hues. Ethan rose, moving to the door. He opened it slowly, letting the fresh morning flood inside. Snow sparkled beyond, pristine and unbroken, save for their trail from the night before. The cold air rushed in, bringing with it a sharp freshness that felt like rebirth. The pup limped toward the doorway, its mother guiding gently beside it. Together they stepped out into the dazzling snow. The pup staggered once, nearly falling, but the mother nudged it with her nose, steadying its wobbly steps. Side by side, they crossed into the new day. Ethan stood framed in the doorway, watching silently. Something long dormant stirred within him, a deep ache that had numbed over the years, awakening again. For years, he had convinced himself his story was over. A soldier without a battle, a man without a kin, yet here stood undeniable proof. Life, relentless and unyielding, pressed onward. Trust endured, fragile yet unwavering. The shepherd mother halted, turning her gaze back toward him. Their eyes met in a deep amber exchange, a silent gratitude too profound for words. No barks or whimpers were needed. The quiet between them spoke volumes. Ethan's throat tightened, and a rare, heartfelt smile broke through. "You owe me nothing," he whispered softly. "But thank you for reminding me." The mother dog held his gaze a beat longer, then walked on, her pup limping faithfully beside her. They vanished into the trees, snow swallowing every trace until only sunlight remained. Sarah stepped up beside Ethan, her coat drawn tight. "They'll come back," she said with quiet conviction. Ethan cast her a questioning glance, brow raised. "You gave them a reason," she affirmed simply, her voice steady with the wisdom born from years of seeing wild hearts find their way home. He looked once more toward the tree line, then closed the door softly. The cabin felt warmer now, less hollow. He settled again by the fire, and for the first time in many winters, a peace, faint but real, traced the corners of his lips. Days later, as he chopped wood by the cabin, he heard it again, the familiar bark. He turned to see them, the mother shepherd standing proud in the snow, her pup bounding clumsily at her side, now stronger despite the limp. They approached not in desperation, but with the calm assurance of neighbors returning home. From that day on, the two dogs came often. Sometimes they warmed themselves by the fire, other times they lingered by the door, but always they remained close. No longer mere visitors, they became part of the cabin, part of Ethan's heart, like fate had gifted him the family he never dreamed possible. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the ridge painting the mountains with fire, Ethan sat alongside Sarah on the porch, the two dogs resting near their feet. The pup gnawed clumsily on a stick, the mother watching with quiet pride. Ethan whispered almost to himself, "You reminded me of something long forgotten, that kindness is never lost, never forgotten." The dogs remained still, their presence the only answer he needed. At that moment, Ethan Ward felt the war within him begin to fade, replaced by the steady beat of trust, hope, and a fresh start born beneath the snow. In the end, what Ethan discovered wasn't just the survival of a wounded pup or the loyalty of its mother, but a quiet truth that miracles still walk beside us. Sometimes they come not with thunder or lightning, but as the soft plea of a hurt soul, in the warmth of shared firelight, in the courage to keep moving when darkness seems unending. For those who see these moments are gifts from God Himself, whispering that compassion is never in vain, and that hope is never truly lost. Just as Ethan opened his cabin to 2 lost souls, we too are called daily to open our hearts at home, within our families and in our communities. Even the smallest acts of kindness ripple outward, becoming the modern miracles our world desperately needs. If this story has touched your soul, I invite you to share it with someone who needs to remember that hope still breathes. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. Tell us where you're watching from, and let your voice join this community of light. If you believe God still works wonders through love, through unwavering faith and the gift of second chances, type Amen in the comments below. United, we lift our voices in prayer, asking for blessings of peace, resilience, and safety for every soul watching. And if tales of loyalty, bravery, and the everyday miracles standing by our side move your heart, please subscribe to this channel. Together, we'll embark on this path carrying hope into every shadowed corner of our lives.